Welcome to the M1 podcast, set up to provide features and stories up and down and in and around the M1. Relax and listen. If you enjoy, please share and like. In this episode, we have focused on Louth and Meath, where we'll be discussing with Maria White, who's a candidate for Sinn Fein in the Laytown Bettystown area of County Meath, Cllr Emma Cutlip, who's a Labour candidate and councillor for the Drogheda Urban area, and also Cllr Emma Coffee for Fianna Fail in Dundalk South, and we'll be discussing their campaigns in their respective councils. But first, we have a discussion with Cillian Ford about the voting register, the radio debates, and the latest news in the local election campaigns. The local elections are coming up next week, Friday the 7th of June. I'm joined by Cillian Ford. In the last of our episodes on the local elections, Cillian is a former councillor for both Sinn Fein and Labour and has been discussing with me over this series the role of a councillor, the role of local authorities, and what it's like to be a councillor and a candidate. And then we've been discussing particular aspects of local government and how it's going to pan out in, for example, Fine Gael. And this week we're looking at Louth and Meath. And later in the episode, I'm joined by three candidates: Maria White, Sinn Fein candidate in Laytown Bettystown, Cllr Emma Cutlip in Drogheda, and Cllr Emma Coffee from Dundalk. And we'll be talking with them about their campaigns and candidacy. So, Cillian, two stories in the news about local government. Do you remember the Dublin riots? The Brazilian biker?
I do, yeah.
Brazilian biker, he intervened and he pushed the attacker, off the kids who he is attacking. There was obviously a big reaction to this incident and led to riots around the city, but Caio Benicio became quite known because there was a GoFundMe account set up to buy him a pint, and that campaign to buy him a pint brought in €370,000. So that was some deal for him. Now he is running as a candidate in the inner city of Dublin for Fianna Fail, and he says he wants to support other people like him, the bike riders with Deliveroo and so on, who are quite often in a vulnerable position in their job, getting attacked, getting racist attacks. Any thoughts on his candidacy?
Yeah, I would. I mean, he carried out a very noble public service during the attack. Along with a few other people, I think he became the representative, in a sense, of citizens in action. Well, not really citizens, but people in action. And there was other people involved as well. I think one of the reasons that his campaign was probably funded so well is that it was a rejection of the riots, in a sense. The accusation. I think it's more an accusation. I think it did turn out that the stabber had been himself, not originally from Ireland, and I think a lot of people, then felt, well, we're going to support the other person from Ireland who, not from Ireland, who prevented the attack from escalating into something worse. In terms of his electoral chances, I'd say they're probably, close to zero. The north inner city is probably the most competitive constituency, certainly in Dublin, if not Ireland. Is very demanding. You've got very organised community groups in the area who, they don't tolerate blow-ins. And I mean blow-ins, I don't mean nationality, but people without a community background. So I don't think he has a hope. It's kind of nice in a way, and, that he's running, and good luck to him. But no, I couldn't see him getting elected in North Inner City.
Yeah.
I saw his posters say, actually, he's a handsome man and maybe get a few votes. But the problem is, of course, for the North Inner City, is that its population of non-Irish has, it's enormous now. I mean, it was from, probably 20 years ago, it was 2 or 3%. Now it's up to like 45%, as far as I know. In a lot of the wards in the inner city, not so much further out into the likes of East Wall or so. And I think the problem is that a lot of people just don't register.
Yes.
They're in a transient population. They're not going to hang around.
We'll talk about the voting register just a little bit later.
Yeah.
Marion Agrios was the Fine Gael candidate in Drogheda, and she is had to pull out just this evening. After the merge, she received money from a builder in order to withdraw her objection to a housing development near her Termonfeckin home. So she would have been a candidate for Fine Gael in the Drogheda Rural ward for County Louth. The story was made public by the On the Ditch website, and she has issued a statement on social media confirming the report and has asked voters not to select her as a candidate for councillor, because she will be on the ballot, but she's actually had to ask people not to vote for her.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting. It's a great story, and again, broken by On the Ditch. Who's done some amazing work over the last 2-3 years, but really don't get the credit. They're kind of dismissed by both the media and the political class as some sort of nuisance. But they've done a brilliant job, and most of it just by being, trawling through, using freedom of information as a tool. I mean, it's journalism at its rawest. And so, fair play to them. Great piece of work.
Yeah, great story. How did she have the nerve to actually go for council?
I think she's very involved in the local Chamber of Commerce, and
of course she is.
Lions Club.
Remember, we were talking last week about the far right and their possibilities in the local elections. The radio station LMFM are running a series of debates with candidates, and yesterday they had a candidate from Drogheda on, and I think he's standing for the Irish People's Party, which is different from Irish Freedom Party, or maybe could that have been a mistake from the point of view of the radio station? I'm not sure. Or is it further fragmentation of the right? I am not quite sure. I didn't think that there was going to be any candidates for Irish Freedom in Fine Gael, for example, but there is in Balbriggan, and there's another candidate declaring Ireland is full as well. So I was just listening to the debate, and I just want your perspective on this, because he was introduced and he talked about his reason for running was because he wanted an residential addiction centre in Drogheda. Very good cause. And because he cited his own experiences of addiction arising from post-traumatic stress disorder, arising from child abuse that he experienced between 6 years of age and 16. And then the interviewer, Michael Reid of LMFM, immediately started to ask him about his suitability as a candidate because of his criminal record. And then later we heard about his Ireland is full narrative as well, that he was also pushing immigrants out. And, he could have focused on that. I just thought it was wrong for him to focus on, let's say, his criminal convictions, because they were committed at a time when he was not well mentally and psychologically.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I think if we're trying to encourage the reintegration of people in general, like I'm reluctant to use the word criminals, then there has to be a context on somebody's criminal activity, and if it was in the throes of addiction, I think we should give people more slack if they then stand for election, which is ultimately about working for not an awful lot of money. It's not a very glamorous job, it's not a very nice job. This is leaving aside his Ireland is full nonsense. But yes, I mean, I don't think it's particularly relevant to any candidate if they have a criminal record, which isn't, and I imagine this is probably fairly low scale addict type behavior. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he had a lot of convictions. I'm not too sure about the nature of them. One was for armed robbery, but
right.
But
right, on this kind of serious scale. Yeah, I mean,
on his Twitter account, he did say things like "burn, baby, burn" in relation to one of the asylum accommodation centres that was on fire. And his answer to the presenter, Michael Reid, was that it was already on fire. I was just saying what was already happening. So I think that's the angle for any interviewer to focus on, is the comments. The irresponsible. This isn't really someone you'd want to have representing your area who's going to behave on social media like that, I think. Whereas,
no, I agree. I mean, I have a vested interest in Ireland being a comfortable place for people of different colour, religion, ethnicity, and so on. And I like the fact that we're known throughout the world as decent, friendly people. I hate the idea that we're seen as, sort of Hungary Mark II, or pick your choice of kind of small-minded, racist countries. So I do, I find them objectionable.
I know we were talking last week about maybe interviewing one, but I went to this person's profile and I noticed a lot of the tweets were deleted. So it's like, you're gonna put these tweets to you and make you accountable for them. But so there's a bit of tidying up of profiles going on, and yeah, that makes it difficult, because if people are slippery and on Monday spitting out bile, and then by Friday it looks like they have a nice tidy social media profile because their posts have all been deleted, makes it difficult to pin down.
Yes. No, I didn't realize that person had done that, because I did see, after you had flagged it to me, that you were intending, or we were talking about whether you would interview them or not. I did look at their profile and was, pretty awful stuff. And I've no problem with people having an alternative political view, but when it's just nasty and mean and just lashing out at people because of skin color or religion, well, yeah, I mean, I draw the line and go, this is these people are unacceptable. And I hope enough people remain thinking that way. Even if they had a proposed solution to their grievance, that would be one thing, but they don't. I mean, it's just, we're not taking any refugees, we're not doing this, shut down all the centres, house the Irish first. It's just like, how's that going to actually work? How does this work in practice? So it would be interesting to see if any of them get elected anywhere in the country. I suspect one or two will. And let's see how long they last in the council dealing with double yellow lines, medical card requests, and a bunch of other stuff. There's a famous quote, I think it was from Willie O'D, and it was about, 1/3 of the people who ask you to do, it was about what you get asked as a politician to do. And it was 1/3 the request is illegal, 1/3 the request is crazy, and 1/3 the request can't be delivered on. So let's see how these guys get on, because typically the profile of somebody who's going to stand and get elected and stick at it from a local election point of view would be somebody who's involved in the community locally, whether that's from a business level, charity level, community group level, or sports level. None of these guys have that profile. They'd be a teacher. None of them are teachers. Solicitors. None of them are solicitors.
Because solicitors are often on the high street and they've people coming in.
Yeah, it's people with a profile locally who are delivering local services to local people. They don't have this profile, so I don't see them having the patience and the discipline to stick at it, because it's a dull, thankless, poorly paid position to have. And I just don't see them sticking around to apply it.
I was talking to someone who works for the Department of Social Welfare there the other day, and this leads into the next question, because the comment this person was making is in relation to the quality of candidates. They were saying that they were having a conversation with other people in work, and bear in mind, these are people who are in social welfare. They're dealing with, on a day-to-day level, with the difficult cases. And they had a candidate call to the door, and the candidate, all they wanted to talk about was potholes. I said, I'm not interested. I don't care about potholes. What else have you got to say? And he struggled to come up with anything. And it's like, we myself and himself were talking. why do these people put themselves forward if they're not really serious about doing anything on the council? If they just want the profile or what? What is it about it?
I think, and even from my own perspective, when I ran for election, I don't know about you, but when I ran for election, I didn't really think I was going to get elected. And I did it because I thought it'd be a bit of fun. And, I remember, yeah, I did it. Definitely one of the reasons I ran is because I wanted to have always said that I ran an election. It was like a little, a bucket list, And, before the election, I was probably going to win a seat. So, it wasn't a shock, but I didn't put myself forward as a candidate to go on the council.
So that's about
I certainly like running in elections. They're fun. I like elections.
That's about the quality of candidates. So what about the quality of voters? I know you and I, we both called it door to door, and really this whole thing we were talking about before, I remember being in Skerries and I was thinking people would be a bit, because of a higher voter turnout there, I thought they'd be more engaged. But 3 days before the election, so many people no, I don't know who I'm voting for. So the voters just struck me as a bit slippery, a bit unprincipled. Then the voter turnout is
what's that now? 40? Is it 40% or even that?
I'm in this ward where I'm based, I think it might be 30-35%, very low.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's a question of the voting register.
Oh,
yeah. A lot of houses aren't on it because people don't realize you need to actually register to vote. So there's a lot of disengagement from how government works. And I found it very difficult actually as a candidate, because knock on the door, what's the council do for me? It doesn't deliver education, it doesn't deliver housing, it doesn't deliver transport. That's the National Transport Authority. Housing is, government policy. It's unclear as to what the councils do. So that is difficult. So that maybe that's part of it, why people are switched off. But
yeah, no, that's a great point. That it is difficult to sell. It's not even bin collections they do anymore. It's a provision of water, street lighting, traffic management. There's a lot of things they do, but ultimately none of them are really that important individually to anybody. Obviously people would know if there's no traffic lights working. Sorry, not traffic lights. Actually, they do operate traffic lights. If there was no street lights working, people would be upset. But the things the council deliver at the moment have already been bagged and accepted as absolute minimum standards. Like we wouldn't turn around and go, well, your water's going to get turned off because we don't have enough money. You can't kind of go. You couldn't run an election of better water quality or higher pressure. Nobody would
keep the traffic lights working.
Yeah, or the street lights would be brighter. Nobody would care. So you are kind of left with, being that kind of multi-purpose representative who's able to engage with the state. So you're doing stuff like
about the level of engagement. So so people don't vote because they're not on the register. People don't vote because they're not interested, and then people who do vote. And in Australia, it's the other end of the extreme. So 100% of people vote because it's compulsory voting. I was talking to someone, I think from the Netherlands, and they said as soon as you're 18, you're automatically on the voting register. So you don't have to register. You're automatically on. Now, I think I can't imagine what our voting register would look like if all 18-year-olds were automatically on the register. The turnout in general elections would probably go from 65 down to about 35 or 40%, because if everyone is automatically on the register. But what about this thing about knowledge? In order to get a driver's license, you have to pass a test. And what about the idea of a voter's license? In order to get a voter's license, you have to pass a test showing you have certain knowledge. Could that be a way to administer?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. Yeah, you could run for the far right on that one. You could have a little test, a little civics test set by Gareth Mullen, right? And I would ask you really, some questions about the function of whatever office is being is vacant. So if you're going for a local election, they'll ask you what does the council do, and then you answer a bunch of, say, 10 questions, and then based on your 10 questions, you either pass or you fail. Or you could have a variant of it, that you could have your vote weighted. Like, why would my vote be worth the same as somebody who's not interested and can't even say what the local council do? Is that fair?
Yes.
So I know what the local council does. So surely my vote should be worth more than the guy down the road who doesn't know what the local council does. But if you did that, then you cease to be a democracy. And we work on democracy. The concept of democracy kind of works in a way on the wisdom of crowds. So if you ask 2,000 Athenians, from 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, who should be their leader, you end up with somebody who's kind of in the middle between the extreme who wants to go and fight the Persians and the guy who wants to integrate with the Spartans, and so you end up with a middle guy, and so and it's kind of proved to be relatively okay. But I think compulsory voting is interesting, and it's funny because usually the argument is the opposite of the point you make, but I think your point is more accurate. I think if we did have compulsory voting and you had people automatically going on to register, we would probably have a lower turnout. Because typically the only way you can make compulsory voting, you have to incentivize it. And I think in Belgium, how they do it is you get a fine, but nobody pays the fine. So say, for instance, you're on social welfare, who would be the least likely people to vote. There's kind of a pretty clear correlation between income and voting participation. Not the higher the income, but at a certain point, upper middle class are the most likely to vote. Lower working class are the least likely to vote. So if you have somebody on social welfare, they don't vote and they get, they're fined €10 in the next social welfare, and not handout, but the next social welfare payment, I'm not sure that would make any difference to them.
I think with all these kind of policies is, once you start to change them, it's where do you draw the line as the question. So,
yeah, it would be. I do kind of like the idea of some sort of test for voting. I'm just not too sure how you would do it in a way that doesn't not even so much fair, but just doesn't destroy. Maybe not straight away, but doesn't erode the concept of one man, one vote.
Yeah, because in other countries, you have citizenship testing for people who come into the country. They have to show a certain amount of knowledge about how the system works. Yeah. But there's nothing that tests the existing people or the people who've come in new to the country about how government works. Something to think about, but not likely to be pursued by absolutely anybody. So on that note, I think I'm going to talk to some candidates who are running for council in the real world. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining me today. We've on this podcast, we've been discussing, last week we had an episode focus on Fine Gael, and we also discussed with the Dublin Inquirer magazine. They produced a Dublin voter guide for people to look at and study the candidates' form and questions and so on. And this episode, we're looking at the counties of Louth and Meath, which are also along the M1. And it's just in different dynamics to Fine Gael. And I think it's obviously different constituencies, different issues. And I want to explore that. And also even the difference between the two counties there, for example, Meath and Louth, and how do you get the right kind of planning or investment into areas. But also in the two previous podcasts, episode 12 and 6, my God, six episodes ago, we first had an episode on local elections. Myself and Cillian Ford talked a lot about the role of a councillor. I stood for election actually twice as an independent in 2014. I got 287 votes. And then in 2019, another robust campaign but I only got 292 votes. So I'm always curious to talk to the people who actually win elections, or who might stand a better chance, and just the whole dynamic of becoming a councillor, and before you're elected, after you're elected. So I think Emma Coffee, you are a councillor for Dundalk. You're saying you've been on the council for 8 years. So there was an election in 2014. What happened
Yeah,
there?
I wasn't. I was co-opted in 2016.
Okay.
So I ran in the general election in 2016 as a general election candidate. Wasn't a councillor. I suppose I classified myself as a gender quota candidate. And didn't get elected, but aided my running mate to top the poll with my transfers, and his seat became vacant. And there was a internal convention where 4 people went for the vacant council seat, and I suppose, luckily enough, I suppose the Fianna Fail membership thought, well, I worked hard in the general election and I deserved a chance.
Very good.
So I became a councillor then in 2016 and ran for election in 2019 and got re-elected to that
Very
seat.
good. And so you were involved in the Fianna Fail party for a number of years, were you?
No, I was. I tell you, no, I wasn't. I would have been outside. I would have helped. I wasn't officially a member until I formally became a member in January 2015. But I would have worked the common that basically I became a member of the Thomas Markey Common. So unusually at that time, and I suppose even this time, it was the majority of women. There was 2 men, and then there was 8 women in that common.
Right.
And there were women of a certain vintage, I'll just put it like that. And they were great women, and the men were great. The men were very good, but the women would have always, I suppose, an approach was made to me pre-2014, would I run in 2013, would I've ran in local politics, and it just wasn't the right time for me personally.
Okay.
And I'll be very, whilst I toyed about with it, I never really, I suppose I didn't have any great want in me to do it, but I did want to be involved. I was very politically minded.
You must be insane to be someone of interest then. How's that? Who was thinking of you?
Well, I suppose the family name, the coffee name, would be well known in Dundalk. And we would have, I suppose, local government. Like my great-grandmother was the first female urban district councillor in Dundalk. And then my grandfather would have been involved. My granduncle was involved. He was the last coffee, say, on the council. And look, my father would have ran, actually, believe it or not, he broke the mould and ran for the Workers' Party in 1975. Didn't get elected. But look, we would have talked about politics at the table. That's kind of what I grew up in. But I would have seen myself as a backroom person. And I would have done a lot of community work anyway. But these ladies would have come to me and said, look, we want to know about, the change in the pensions system that came in and it particularly affected women in 2013, 2014. So they wanted me to do talks, say, to women, say, that missed out on that. And would I do a bit of research for them, and would I do a presentation? So they kept me in the loop. And in 2015, I decided, basically they kept on asking me, come on, join. And I had a reluctance to join Fianna Fail, I'll be honest with you. But down to those ladies, there were, and still are, and some of them still canvass with me. They're a great bunch of ladies. Some of them are no longer with us. And it was down to them and down to the chairperson, Peter McKevitt, at the time that I joined that common in Dundalk.
So the TD, was that Peter Fitzpatrick, was it?
No, the TD at the time was Seamus Kirk.
Okay.
Uh,
So he
and
got
then
elected and you took his seat.
No, Declan Burnock got elected
Okay.
at the time. Seamus retired, Declan got elected. I was his running mate, and he was a county councillor for 20 odd years, and I got co-opted then. So, yeah,
And-
big learning curve. Big
Yeah,
learning
and-
curve.
Emma, what were you doing before you were involved with SIP2 and Labour Party, is it?
Yeah, so I worked in DAA area
Dublin Airport Authority.
up at Dublin Airport for over 20 years. Everything from pushing trolleys to security, customer service, all the frontline stuff. And was always a trade union activist through my time working there. It's quite a high density Europe trade union workplace.
Membership, yeah.
Both the DAA, Aer Lingus, all the handling agents and that kind of thing.
Labour was a natural link.
Well, yes, I'm more Labour because I'm a trade unionist rather than a trade unionist because I'm Labour.
Yeah.
So
well, we were talking about this last week.
For me, both in terms of being a trade unionist, but also just in the kind of progressive kind of ideas of social society and equality and that kind of thing, But yeah, I was on again, off again, kind of engaged locally in Drogheda with Labour election campaigns over the years, and then certainly with some of the big referenda and that kind of thing as well. But again, actually quite similar to the other Emma. I would have quite taught myself as a backroom person. I really enjoy policy work. I've written and contributed to a lot of the Labour Party policy documents, and doing that kind of research and finding solutions to problems has always been more what I thought I was more talented in. But eventually, over time, with the right support, and I think a lot of women in politics come across this, that eventually with people telling you you'd be really good, you start to believe it and build your own confidence in putting yourself out there. And I think it's really important to have that kind of support in kind of encouraging you and helping you to really believe in yourself, which can be hard for a woman in politics.
Very good. And you're in the role a few years now, and you're running for re-election.
Yeah, I was co-opted 1 year ago, a little over 1 year ago. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So that's recent enough. Hopefully for you, it's enough time to get you over the line this time. But we'll await with interest, and good luck with your campaign. I'm interested as well, Maria White. You are a new candidate, but you've been involved in Sinn Fein for a number of years. And what's more, you're a school principal, and I'm actually on a board of a school. And my previous job, I had a lot of school visits in that, and you can always see principals are very, very busy people. And in the last episode of this podcast, we were talking about how busy councillors are, councillors working 60 hours a week and so on. Of course, there's different scales to it, but what's your view? What led you to stand as a candidate?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the concern, Garrett, about how I'll manage. A few people have asked me that, but they don't actually know me. So anybody who knows me and anyone asking that question, they just say, do you know Maria? So generally, I kind of thrive on having a lot of things to do. And the role of principal, I see it as very compatible, to be honest, with the role of a local councillor. Because I suppose my role is very varied, it's very busy. I'm involved in policy making, decision making, a lot of consultation with the community and key stakeholders. So I think the skills are very transferable, while I understand there will be a steep learning curve. So why, I suppose, this time? Well, prior to becoming a principal, I had studied sociology and social policy in UCD, and I worked with Focus Ireland with the homeless community in Dublin. And back then, I suppose the mission of Focus Ireland was to eradicate homelessness. And as we know, we now have a huge issue, a housing crisis, and the largest number of homeless people the country has probably ever seen, well, at least in recent times. So what really, I suppose, prompted me this time, you know, we had a family in the school who came to me. They had slept in their car one night, and I just thought, if people like me kind of don't put themselves forward, because obviously the people who are there don't seem to be able to solve the situation right now. So if people like me kind of keep saying, no, how are things going to change? So it was kind of, I suppose, as a principal, your moral compass has to be pointing in the right direction. So that always stays with me, making decisions in the best interests of the children. And I just thought, you know, if there's children in my school who are sleeping in a car at night before they come into school, I can't turn a blind eye to that. And I need to become more involved, and I need to have a voice and a role to play in decision making at a higher level.
That's interesting, and it's interesting that you view it as a higher level, because it's like there's a role of, sometimes councillors talk about how little power they have as well, like, and but
well, I would see it as a kind of, I suppose, in terms of advocacy and raising awareness and raising issues and local issues, I would certainly have more of a voice as a councillor than I would as the principal.
Yeah. And if I know, actually, in obviously housing and home, I work for a housing association, but housing and homelessness is an issue throughout the country, and principals are going to be coming across all these issues in their course of their work. So it'll be an interesting new dynamic to your own being, I suppose. So like the three areas you're standing in, Drogheda, Dundalk, and Laytown Bettystown, two different local authorities, but your three areas probably have more in common with each other than, say, Maria, you're the head office of Meath County Council is in Navan, and let's say someone is homeless, for example, and or whatever their issue is, how do they get to Navan? The only way to get there's no public transport routes, for example. The connections between Atboy and Laytown, they wouldn't be as strong, I suppose, as the connections, say, between Laytown, Bettystown, and Drogheda, because Drogheda has railroad and bus links and all the rest of it to the areas you might represent. I wonder what your perspective is on that, and on how to get Meath Council maybe to deliver for your area.
Yeah. Well, I do think, Garrett, it is a challenge, because I suppose our community here, we do see Drogheda as our local town. We shop there, we socialise there, we go to the cinema, theatre, like, we use the amenities in Drogheda. It takes 40 minutes to get to Navan if you have a car, and if you don't, and as you said, and I mean, there's many parents I know here, I had to do it myself, when my child was having an assessment. It was you know, once a week for a number of weeks, going over to Navan, and it was quite difficult. So I suppose I would be counting on the councillors who are elected for this area to come together and really create a very strong shared vision as to what this community needs. Party politics aside, I think it is the job of councillors to represent the people in their community and do what is best for their community. And if the people elect you and give you that mandate, that's what you should do. So I think we need a strong voice for this area. We need a shared vision. And we need to be able to communicate that clearly, because I suppose there's 7 seats out of the 40 for this municipal area, and all 7 seats mightn't be, you know, given to or won by people from Laytown, Bettystown, Mornington. But, you know, I'm sure we're going to secure a good few of those 7. And the other councillors will be coming across the same issues I'm coming across. I mean, coastal erosion, flood prevention. Coastal erosion is a very big one here, you know, and we need to be sure that in Navan, they understand the seriousness of the situation. So I think coming together, consulting and having that shared vision will be very important going forward.
And the Emma Coffee, you've been on the council a good number of years now. Well, 8. So that what Maria was talking about, I thought was interesting in talking about getting once you're elected, you come kind of allied to the councillors in your area, yet you're all standing for different parties. So, like, say you'd have the Sinn Fein team, for example, in Louth or Meath. You have the Fianna Fail team in Louth or Meath, Labour team in Louth or Meath, and then you have the ward boundaries. What's your perspective on that, Emma? Does allying with your colleagues in Dundalk, does that take precedent over the party?
I'll give you an example. I mean, the municipal area of Dundalk, it has 13 councillors, so it's the largest municipal area in Louth. There's 29 councillors in total. There's 13 councillors in Dundalk, and just literally 3 weeks ago, those 13 councillors, party politics aside, came together and brought a Section 144 motion against the executive, directing that they carry out basically what it was, that they were going to not repair or replace pedestrian lights at a very busy inner relief junction, and basically replace it with temporary zebra crossings. And the whole upgrade was due to zebra crossings being there are not sufficient, and it caused a death. And the costings of it was they basically said no, it was too expensive. And the view of the 13 councillors at the time was, well, no life is too expensive. So we brought that motion. Now, we didn't have to carry through that motion, but the chief executive was aware we had the numbers to get this across the line. And basically a compromise was reached, and we've got new lights being reinstalled in that area. And, that was down to cooperation, collaboration. That was Greens, Sinn Fein, Fianna Fail, Fine Gael and Independents all coming together for that one purpose.
And so, like, would the Drogheda councillors, no insult to you, Emma Cutlip, would they just be, we don't care about traffic lights in Dundalk or whatever?
No, because we needed a majority. Now, we would have had the majority, but we rung around. So we rung around, like, basically, look, I think we're fortunate. Well, I was certainly fortunate in this term. I don't know if it was COVID or what, but there was very much a collaboration across the board in this term, I found, than say the 2016 up to 2019 term that I was involved in. And maybe that's because I was a bit green at that stage. But I found this time there was a lot more, it was community first, party politics second.
Yes.
And I think that's because there was a change of personnel. Like, we saw a lot of changes in the last 5 years. Sadly, some of people passed away. Some people got elected to the Shannon. Some people
changed personnel and councillors.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So I do think, and some people moved on, and there was certainly a younger cohort there. Now that has its advantages and its disadvantages, because the experienced owl heads of how to get things through, you lose that, but at the same time you do have that intrepidation of, well, we're going to take this on and we're going to run with it and see what we can do.
It's interesting to hear your perspective there, because when I was talking to Cillian Ford, he used to be a councillor with Sinn Fein and then Labour, and he was talking about this dynamic of, kind of goes on from what we've been discussing so far, is just, it becomes like the party is actually the councillors and the opposition is the executive. It's, as opposed to it's your party, Sinn Fein versus Fianna Fail versus Fine Gael. That's not the division. It's more the councillors versus the executive. Emma,
and I do think that. Sorry, yes. Sorry. I do think that is more prevalent since the 2014 Act.
Okay.
Pre-2014, there was far more work done working with each other, then, but 2014, because of the erosion of powers, I feel there's an imbalance there between the executive and the checks and balances that the councillors used to have.
What happened with 2014 after the erosion of powers? Which powers were taken away?
Well, basically the town councils were gone.
Okay.
Parts of 8s were watered down completely.
Part 8,
basically, yeah, as in the land acquisitions and land sale, and basically applying for planning permission. The councils would have the councillors would have the last say of what was going to be developed there, what was going to be protected.
Councillors don't decide that anymore, no.
It is watered down now. It's very limited, and each year it's been watered down, and and there will always be a battle, I feel, between local government erosion and the public representatives there, and central government not releasing the powers that should be in local government.
And that's interesting that you say that. And I think there's real challenges at local government. Emma Cutlip, I have to keep saying the surnames, because we have 2 Emmas and Anna Maria. 3 women, which is good too, to be talking to. The issue with Drogheda, we were talking about there recently, regeneration, a few episodes ago on the podcast. Regeneration challenge is huge in Drogheda. A lot of derelict properties, and just a sense of the town is at a low ebb. The change of use of the D Hotel, the closing of Marks and Spencers, and what can the council do about regeneration?
Well, first of all, you're right to recognise that the urban regeneration issue is a huge issue. Vacancy and dereliction across Drogheda is shocking, absolutely shocking. It's a very historic town, and some of the historic buildings are literally crumbling down onto the street level. Now, there are a number of things, minor things that councillors can currently do, one of which I managed to achieve just last September when we were passing our budget. Part of that process includes reviewing the local property tax and reviewing the development levy. And I proposed a 75% reduction in the development levy for urban regeneration projects. And that would apply across the county. But it's specifically to say, well, if you're going to be developing in the town, because I see, planning permissions across in retail parks, which unfortunately are actually in Meath, being granted planning permissions for brand new retail units when we have significantly sized vacant or largely vacant shopping centres in the town, not to mention the street fronting properties that are completely vacant. So why are we building brand new retail units in one area when there are potentials in a different part of the town? So making that a bit more attractive, making it a bit more cost effective. Currently, although central government covers that development levy, but there's little things like that councillors can do. Unfortunately, as you say, with the dilution of powers of local government, there could be other things that councils could do, but is in the power of the executive, such as being free to compulsory purchase order on properties that have been left vacant and derelict. And while councillors can encourage the executive to target a particular property and do the searches and serve notice on the owners, etc., and go through the very lengthy, full of red tape process of doing compulsory purchase orders, it is something that's there available to the executive.
Yeah, I think it would be great if on a national level there was more discussion about the local election campaign, because it does not, aside from seeing posters on lampposts, there's not much that has been said in the media. Local elections are generally considered as, well, what's this mean for who's going to get elected to government? Like if Sinn Fein have a good election in the local elections, we still have time. If Sinn Fein do well, then the talk will all be about not what they will do at local government level, but what's that mean for the general election. And I think for how our communities are and how they're structured and how they're resourced, the important thing is those are the important issues: regeneration or housing, education, school performance of schools, and so on. There's just not much discussion about the reform of local government, and that the media aren't doing that, but the parties don't do that either. In terms of the public domain, like parties maybe issuing plans about what they'll do in local government. Anyone, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, well,
could I just
sorry, two Emmas at the same time.
Yeah. No, well, I know there is a working group at the moment, and they're taking submissions. There was public submissions. It's basically a working group committee on reform of local government. It's an Oireachtas committee. I know I made a submission into it from a personal capacity. I know the ALIG did. I know Lama did. And that's the alliance of. I can never get this. Basically, it's the councillors group. One is the local government. Yeah,
within the Fianna Fail party, is it?
No. This is councillors, representatives across all councillors. So they made a submission. They made basically there was an invite to them and to Lama and to a number of other organisations such as the Meath department. I just can't think of his name there. Who made submissions and actually came and spoke in front of the committee about reform of the local government. The only thing that caught on to the media about that, the national media, was that, councillor security, that people,
safety. Yeah.
And that was the only thing. That was the only thing that was that the national media caught on. It never spoke about the proposals put forward, the submissions put in.
I'd like to come back to that point there that you're making, because one of the things I think, for example, local authorities should have control over is the ETBs, the Education Training Boards, because there are schools in local areas and usually have councillor representation. Why not bring them under the management of councils and make them more democratically accountable, or just organisationally aligned? Then you got aspects of community policing that could be brought into councils. There could be other reforms. Transport as well is such a difficult issue. Instead of having to defer to the NTA, which might be officials located in a far off place, and transport just getting in and around the place. As Emma or Maria, trying to get constituents to get to Navan. How do they do that? I don't know how they do that like that. And the council should be able to resolve that issue, but I don't think the structures are there to facilitate that at the moment.
And it's such a lengthy process, Garrett, as well. Like, to go through the NTA. I mean, we've bus stops here, and we've beautiful new bus shelters where we don't have an actual bus route goes through, and where our bus routes are, we've no bus shelters. So, I mean, people living in the local community and representing the local community could deal with that a lot faster, and the planning would be so much more efficient if it was, as you were saying, rather than having to go through other bodies for these things.
Yeah, it's a lot of statutory agencies that have been set up, and the councils could be doing that work instead. One thing, we're talking about regenerating Drogheda, and I think Dundalk probably has a similar issue. What I've noticed in Dundalk is there's boarded up properties there as well. A lot of space for brownfield and infill development. Is the regeneration issue as potent in Dundalk as Drogheda, do you think, Emma?
No, it's not, because you talk about brownfield sites. I'd love to go where you go, Garrett, because there isn't a brownfield site. The only area
between the Crown Plaza and the town centre, look beyond the buildings, you see a lot of greenfield sites.
No, the only brownfield sites that are actually not zoned or will be zoned is to the west of the town. If you go up to Dundalk now, all those brownfield sites around the Crown Plaza are actually building works. They're being developed. So that to the south of the town, I think, is overdeveloped. I think we need a secondary school there.
Yeah.
I think there is capacity issues on services. And that's the issue. In regards to regeneration, I think Dundalk is actually quite lucky. We got a lot of cross-border funding which invested in the town centre, and we have a very...
The square is looking great. The square, the town hall.
Yeah, and then you have like the south end or the north end of the town now that's got the regeneration, and it's called this Nix's Court. It's now got money which will see the total regeneration of the south end of the north end of the town, with Greenland areas, the river area being basically completely revamped. And that's going to take place now in this term. Effectively, you'll see the works being done there. They've taken into a lot of mixed developments, so shop fronts on the bottom, apartment living on the top, and a lot of the housing trusts have come on board in relation to that.
So that's happening.
Yeah, and that's happening now. I think, now this is just my own observation, and Emma Cutlip might turn around and disagree with me, but look, I go to Drogheda every day, and I think in parallels of the two towns, I mean, Dundalk is faring a lot better. And I think the difference of that is because we were lucky enough that we got that cross-border European funding pre-Brexit. And that was the key, in my opinion, is the difference between the two towns.
That's interesting.
There's also the additional challenge, unfortunately, of two councils having to work together in relation to planning for the town and the surrounding areas.
That's right, because Southgate and Grange Rat in Drogheda, I think, falls in the Meath council boundary, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm found your comments, Emma, there very interesting about the difference for Dundalk and Drogheda, because I'll be more observant of Dundalk the next time I'm up there. But one reflection I would have, and it follows on from episode 5 of this podcast, where we were talking about the League of Ireland teams. And I remember a number of years ago, there was a Zenit St. Petersburg. This ended up being a story in the front page of the Mirror. It was very funny, but in kind of damning in a way. The Zenit St. Petersburg fans had travelled to Dundalk for a game, a European match, and in the morning of the game, they asked the B&B landlord owner, they showed a map of Dundalk and asked the owner, so, could you show me where about in Dundalk Tala Stadium is? So I wonder about the possibilities of a municipal stadiums in Drogheda and Dundalk, or if that will come up. But maybe that's something that could be looked into.
There are plans for, as part of, I don't know if you're aware of the Port Access Northern Cross route in Drogheda, but there are plans as part of that for a stadium to be built in the third phase of that, which would be a new home ground for Drogheda United as well. But the other municipal facilities around that, because municipal facilities in Drogheda are very much lacking. While there is the Lord's Stadium, for example, it has very limited opening hours. It doesn't open on a Sunday, for example. So there is quite a need for that. But if I may, I might bring you back to just the local government reform piece. You were very right to recognise that it's not part of the wider conversation. But actually, as a party, Labour have put out a comprehensive document, policy document, rather than focusing on a manifesto of what local government reforms we would do. And I will actually agree with Emma Coffee that Dundalk has fared better than Drogheda. Droghedans might have their own view of why that is, which she might not agree with. But sure, there we go.
On that last note, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining me. I think it's been an interesting and insightful discussion. So that's the final episode in our local elections series. I hope you enjoyed those episodes, and I hope you enjoy our other episodes on the M1 podcast. The big day for the local elections and European elections is next Friday, 7th of June, so be sure to use your vote. Stay with us for episodes coming up, where we'll be looking at topics of interest for those of you who are up and down and in and around the M1. I'm Garrett Mullen, and this is the M1 podcast, and thank you to David West for sound and editing.